Okay, everyone, this is part 2 of chapter 2 in the book, The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. Okay, the inequality era. This era begins in the 1970s, but it hits full stride in the 80s with the presidency of Ronald Reagan. He wants to expand the Southern strategy, which was first introduced by Nixon, to the whole country. He thinks that the Northerners can be sold the same ideas that the Southerners already ascribed to. He starts with this anti-government, pro-white mentality. And this is sold by framing the white worker as the hard-working and honest taxpayers who are being taken advantage of by a government who wants to take your money and give it to the lazy and undeserving Black folks. Shh. Don't mention the fact that Black people are often in these situations because of policies put in place to keep them down. And definitely don't tell anyone that Black people pay taxes often a higher percentage of their income, making it hard for them to move from their socioeconomic place in society. But we surely don't want any educated folks. I did learn something. I decided to look this up because one of the things that she talks about is plutocrats. And I was like, I wonder what the difference between a plutocracy and an oligarchy are. And in case you didn't know too, I looked it up for you. So a plutocracy is where the wealthy rule because of their wealth. And an oligarchy is where the few and elite rule. Could be because of their wealth, or it could be because of their social standing or something else. I know that we hear oligarchy right now a lot, but I think in our particular situation, it could kind of be interchanged with plutocracy because most of these small group are there because they are extremely wealthy. So that's the difference, in case you didn't know. Plutocrats use this strategy to help gain political momentum. Number 1, fear people of color. Number 2, hate the government because they coddle people of color. And number 3, then you should trust the market and the 1%. I can't help but to add just a little bit here. I feel like this is happening right now because right now it's like, oh, look at us. We have all this money. Don't you want to be like us? Then you should trust that we're going to do what's best to help you guys get all this money. Really? Because it seems like maybe that's not the plan. Maybe the plan is, hey, look, we have all of this money. Hey, look, we want more money and we don't want you to have money because that would take away from our money. But that could just be my opinion. Now, Lee Atwater was the right-wing strategist for George H.W. Bush and for Ronald Reagan. And I'm going to read this quote directly from the book. Understand that he uses the N-word. I am going to say N-word because it's not appropriate. He says, you start out in 1954 by saying N-word, N-word, N-word. By 1968, you can't say N-word. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is Blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this. Is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than N-word, N-word. Lee Atwater was connecting these negative things to Black folks. And he is making sure that he is evolving with the time and making himself abstract enough but still planning to hurt Black folks. He admits this plan. This isn't somebody conjuring this up or trying to, decipher what he was doing. He said these words. That was his plan. This was used in the 1980s as Republicans racialized the inner city and made people believe that the government was giving Black people what white people had to work for. Cue hate and mistrust of the government. They're right on track. So, in a poll in 2016, 53% of white moderates and 69% of white conservatives said that Black Americans take more than they give. Looks like they're getting their message across just the way that they wanted to. To give you a little bit of perspective, direct quote from the book, we could eliminate all poverty in the United States by spending just 12% more than the cost of the 2017 Republican tax cuts. By the way, now those cuts are permanent. But of course, it's definitely the Black person on welfare that's the real problem here. I am going to finish this chapter with a couple paragraph quotes because they're so good. This first one comes from Heather McGhee's law professor, Ian Haney Lopez, who wrote a book in 2014 called Dog Whistle Politics: How Coded Racial Appeals Have Reinvented Racism and Wrecked the Middle Class. Haven't read that one yet. I can't suggest it, but I'm sure it's wonderful. I'll probably put it on my list. As Professor Haney Lopez points out, priming white voters with racist dog whistles was the means. The end was an economic agenda that was harmful to working and middle-class voters of all races, including white people. In railing against welfare and the war on poverty, conservatives like President Reagan told white voters that government was the enemy because it favored Black and brown people over them. But their real agenda was to blunt government's ability to challenge concentrated wealth and corporate power. The hurdle conservatives faced was that they needed the white majority to turn against society's two strongest vessels for collective action: the government and labor unions. Racism was the ever-ready tool for the job, undermining white Americans' faith in their fellow Americans, and it worked. Reagan cut taxes on the wealthy but raised them on the poor, waged war on the unions that were the backbone of the white middle class, and slashed domestic spending. And he did it with the overwhelming support of the white middle class. And the final paragraph. Racism then works against non-wealthy white Americans in two ways. First, it lowers their support for government actions that could help them economically out of a zero-sum fear that it could help the racialized undeserving as well. Yet racism's work on class consciousness is not total. There are still some New Deal type economic policies that the majority of white Americans support, like increasing the federal minimum wage and raising taxes on the wealthy. But the racial polarization of our two-party system has forced a choice between class interest and perceived racial interest, and in every presidential election since the Civil Rights Act, the majority of white people chose the party of their race. That choice keeps a conservative faction in power that blocks progress on the modest economic agenda they could support. Political scientists Woo-Jin Lee and John Romer studied the rise of anti-government politics in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s and found that the Republican Party's adoption of policies that voters perceived as anti-Black, an opposition to affirmative action, welfare, harsh policing, and sentencing, won them millions more white voters than their unpopular economic agenda would have attracted. Conservatives created a distrust of minorities, specifically Black people, but minorities in general. And then they used that to make sure that we would vote against our best interests. Here we are. What are we going to do about it? Now, chapter 3 is entitled Going Without. let's see what happened.